Hello all, welcome, and thank you for clicking on this video. My name is Dr. Coliette Morton. This video will discuss civil liberties and civil rights in the United States. We will explore the definitions, similarities, and differences between these two concepts. We will also discuss the influence of Black Americans on the progression of civil rights and civil liberties in the United States. Please feel free to watch this video as many times as you need. And if you really enjoy it, please share with others. Okay, let's get started. Civil liberties. According to the Cornell Legal Information Institute, civil liberties are freedoms guaranteed by the U.S. Constitution, primarily from the First Amendment. They are natural rights which are inherent to each person. While they are commonly referred to as rights, civil liberties actually operate as restraints on how the government can treat its citizens. You may also appreciate the explanation given by helpfulprofessor.com. Feel free to pause and read. Civil liberties refer to the fundamental rights and freedoms that individuals possess, typically protected by a law or a constitution, which safeguard them from undue interference by the government or other individuals. On the screen, you will notice a political cartoon where an FBI agent is blocked by Apple from viewing an iPhone's contents. Quick story. The FBI wanted to view the contents of terrorist suspect who used iPhone. When the FBI could not bypass the phone encryption, they asked Apple to assist them. Apple declined to assist the FBI due to civil liberties concerns. Apple argued that by providing the government an avenue to encrypted user data, they would violate a user's right to privacy and possibly open the door to government exploitation. Apple's decision to not cooperate with the FBI could be seen as protection of user privacy from government interference. Civil liberties are often seen as negative rights, meaning they involve the absence of government disruption. Some examples of civil liberties include freedom of speech, freedom of religion, the right to privacy, the right to due process, and the right to be free from unreasonable searches and seizures. These liberties are considered essential for the functioning of a democratic society, as they provide individuals with autonomy and protect them from arbitrary state action. The rhetoric of civil liberties in the United States was heavily influenced by the work of English philosopher John Locke. Locke's discussion of inalienable rights, rights that no ruler could infringe upon, helped shape colonial ideas of tyranny under King George III, which eventually led to the Colonial Declaration of Independence. American civil liberties are protected in the Bill of Rights, ratified by 3/4 of the states in 1791. Quick story. One of the main complaints between the Patriots toward the British Empire was a tyrannical government. Post-revolution, many newly minted Americans were fearful of escaping one tyrannical government only to end up in another on the western side of the Atlantic Ocean. The Articles of Confederation became the governing law of the United States. Unfortunately for the central government, the Articles of Confederation did not provide the federal government with the authority necessary to shape the nation. For instance, under the Articles, the federal government did not have an executive branch, Congress could not enforce laws, had no power to tax or regulate trade, no national court system, and changes to the Articles of Confederation required a unanimous vote of the 13 states. So, naturally, there had to be some revision. So much revision that the Articles of Confederation were tossed all together and the Constitutional Convention commenced in 1787. Now, the Constitution gave the central government exponentially more power than the Articles, and this increase in power concerned some Americans about potential tyranny. So a compromise was made that a Bill of Rights would be added to the Constitution upon the document's ratification. Thus, the protection of American civil liberties is codified. If you are unfair with the Bill of Rights, here they are for your viewing. You may notice that some of the liberties or rights were utilized for civil rights purposes. The one that you notice first is probably the First Amendment, which states, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or of the people's right to peaceably assemble, and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. The First Amendment has been integral to the development of civil rights protections in the United States. A bit later in the video, we will discuss the similarities of civil liberties and civil rights. Civil rights. Does civil rights sound familiar? This term is most likely etched in your brain due to the Black American-led civil rights movement, particularly the demonstrations, boycotts, and protests led by people like Martin Luther King Jr., Fannie Lou Hamer, and Medgar Evers. Civil rights encompass a wide range of principles and protections. These include the right to equality before the law, freedom of expression, freedom of religion, the right to privacy, and the right to participate in the political process. You again may also appreciate the explanation given by helpfulprofessor.com. Feel free to pause and read. To make sure that we're all on the same page, we should begin with an official definition of what civil rights are in the United States. According to the United States Department of Health and Human Services, civil rights are personal rights guaranteed and protected by the U.S. Constitution and federal laws enacted by Congress, such as the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990. Civil rights include protection from unlawful discrimination. In slightly simpler terms, civil rights can be understood as the government being proactive to protect individuals from discrimination, ensure their equal treatment under the law, and promote their overall well-being and dignity. Civil rights protections rest on the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment, which states, "No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws." Using this clause, Americans have been able to combat racism, sexism, classism, and other forms of discriminatory practices that have accelerated movements in a positive direction. Here are a few that you may be familiar with. Plessy v. Ferguson, where the Supreme Court upheld a Louisiana state law that allowed for equal but separate accommodations for the white and colored races. This decision led to the implementation of separate but equal laws throughout the southern United States. Korematsu v. United States, where the Supreme Court ruled that the internment of Japanese citizens in California was a military necessity not based on race. Brown v. Board of Education, where the Supreme Court ruled separating children in public schools on the basis of race was unconstitutional. This ruling led to the slow integration of public schools. The recently overturned Roe v. Wade, where the Supreme Court ruled a woman's constitutional right to choose to terminate a pregnancy. As you probably noticed, not all these cases have cited the Equal Protection Clause have had a favorable ruling. What is deemed a civil right or protection of civil rights varies based on many things, including political climate, social mores, and the opinions of the justices who hear the case. While the United States has done an excellent job of presenting itself as the greatest example and protector of civil rights, the United States has had its fair share of hurdles. The United States has had a history of denying civil rights to various groups due to socioeconomic, gender, religious, and racial discrimination. The early British colonial version of voting only included land-owning, white, Protestant Christian men, completely excluding everyone else. The American Revolution ushered in a more expanded electorate and allowed political participation for non-land-owning white men, and in a few states, it also allowed for land-owning Blacks and land-owning women to vote. However, this oversight was quickly rectified to exclude non-white males from the polls. The examples of the United States denying civil rights on the basis of race are plentiful. One of the most recognizable is the Dred Scott case, when an enslaved man decided to sue for his freedom after being taken into free territory by his late owner. In 1857, the Supreme Court ruled that Black people were not and could not be citizens of the United States. Therefore, they had no claim to civil rights in the country. Popular thinking of the 18th, 19th, and 20th centuries claimed that women were not capable of making political, financial decisions on their own. Because women were thought to be property of men, men were the only ones who should have decision-making power. Now, I don't want to leave you without any real-world examples of civil rights protections. So here are some that you are probably familiar with. The 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments to the U.S. Constitution, also known as the Reconstruction Amendment, prohibits the enslavement of any person in the United States, prohibits discrimination against any citizen, prohibits denial of political participation to any male citizen. The 19th Amendment guaranteed women the right to vote in all U.S. states. Yes, there are major loopholes in these amendments that were and are still used to discriminate against citizens. For example, the aforementioned Plessy v. Ferguson, Korematsu v. United States, and the recent overturning of Roe v. Wade. However, these example amendments are examples of codified civil rights legislation. Differences between civil liberties and civil rights. Civil rights and civil liberties are two essential concepts within the field of law and governance that are often used interchangeably but hold distinct meanings. While both concepts relate to the protection and preservation of individual rights and freedoms, they differ in scope and focus. Civil rights refer to the legal protections granted to individuals by the government to ensure equal treatment and opportunities in society. These rights are primarily concerned with the prevention of discrimination based on characteristics such as race, gender, religion, nationality, disability, or any other protected category. Civil rights are typically established and enforced through laws, regulations, and court decisions. The main objective of civil rights is to promote equality and eradicate discrimination. They aim to ensure that all individuals have equal access to public services, education, employment, housing, and other areas of public life. Civil rights include the right to vote, the right to a fair trial, the right to freedom from discrimination in employment, and the right to equal protection under the law. These rights are protected by various laws, including the Voting Rights Act of 1965 in the United States. On the other hand, civil liberties are individual freedoms and rights that are guaranteed and protected by the Constitution, statutes, and judicial interpretation. Unlike civil rights, which focus on ensuring equality, civil liberties primarily emphasize the protection of individual autonomy and limiting government intrusion into personal matters. Civil liberties are essential for safeguarding individual privacy, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of assembly, and the right to due process. Civil liberties serve as a check on the power of the government, ensuring that individuals can express their opinions, practice their beliefs, and engage in activities without unwarranted interference. These rights are often regarded as fundamental to a democratic society and are enshrined in documents such as the Bill of Rights in the United States Constitution. How do civil liberties and civil rights complement each other? Civil rights and civil liberties are two essential aspects of individual rights and freedoms. Civil rights primarily focus on equality, prohibiting discrimination, and ensuring equal treatment and opportunities for all individuals. Civil liberties, on the other hand, concentrate on individual autonomy, protecting freedoms of speech, religion, assembly, and privacy. While civil rights address issues of inequality and discrimination, civil liberties safeguard individual freedoms and limit government interference. Both concepts are crucial for maintaining a just and democratic society, working together to promote fairness, justice, and the protection of individual rights. The similarities between civil rights and civil liberties include protection of individual rights. Both civil rights and civil liberties aim to protect the rights and freedoms of individuals, whether it is ensuring equal treatment and opportunities, civil rights, or safeguarding individual autonomy and limiting government intrusion, civil liberties. Both concepts seek to preserve and uphold the fundamental rights of individuals within a society. The American judicial system. Civil rights and civil liberties are established and protected through the judicial system. They rely on constitutional provisions, laws, regulations, and court decisions to define and enforce these rights and freedoms. In many countries, there are specific legal mechanisms and institutions dedicated to addressing violations of civil rights and civil liberties, such as human rights commissions or civil liberties organizations. Democratic values. Both civil rights and civil liberties are rooted in democratic principles. They are fundamental elements of a democratic society that values individual freedoms, equality, and the protection of human rights. The promotion and preservation of civil rights and civil liberties contribute to the overall functioning and legitimacy of democratic systems. Overlapping rights. While civil rights and civil liberties have distinct emphasis, there are instances where their concerns overlap. For example, freedom of speech, a civil liberty, can also be viewed as a civil right when it comes to ensuring equal access and opportunities for all individuals to express their opinions. Similarly, the right to privacy, a civil liberty, can be connected to civil rights concerns regarding discrimination and unequal treatment in personal matters. Complementary nature. Civil rights and civil liberties are mutually reinforcing. The protection of civil liberties can contribute to the advancement of civil rights by providing individuals with the freedom to exercise their rights, challenge discriminatory practices, and advocate for equal treatment. Conversely, the guarantee of civil rights can enhance civil liberties by ensuring that all individuals, regardless of their background, have equal access to exercise their freedoms without discrimination or prejudice. Historical struggles. Civil rights and civil liberties have been at the center of many historical struggles for justice, equality, and human rights. Movements and activists have fought for both civil rights and civil liberties, advocating for social change, legal reforms, and the recognition and protection of fundamental rights. Examples include the civil rights movement in the United States, the fight against apartheid in South Africa, and various movements for women's rights, LGBTQ+ rights, and religious freedom worldwide. While civil rights and civil liberties differ in their specific focuses and objectives, they share common foundations and values. Both concepts play vital roles in ensuring the protection of individual rights, promoting equality, and upholding the principles of democracy. Black American impact on civil liberties. Black Americans have had a profound impact on civil liberties in the United States. Through their activism, advocacy, and legal battles, they have fought for and expanded civil liberties for themselves and other marginalized communities. Here are some key ways in which Black Americans have impacted civil liberties. First Amendment rights. Black Americans have been at the forefront of defending and exercising First Amendment rights, including freedom of speech, assembly, and protest. They have used these rights to challenge systemic racism, advocate for social justice, and push for political and policy changes. Voting rights. Black Americans have played a crucial role in the struggle for voting rights. Despite facing significant barriers such as poll taxes, literacy tests, and discriminatory practices, they fought for the right to vote. The Civil Rights Movement led to the passage of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which protected voting rights and prohibited racial discrimination in elections. Equal protection. Black Americans have worked to ensure equal protection under the law. The 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause has been a cornerstone in the fight against racial discrimination. Black activists and legal scholars have fought against discriminatory laws, practices, and policies, leading to important Supreme Court decisions that advance equal protection, such as Brown v. Board of Education. Criminal justice reform. Black Americans have shed light on racial disparities and injustices within the criminal justice system. Activists and organizations have advocated for reforms to address issues such as police brutality, racial profiling, mass incarceration, and unfair sentencing practices. Their efforts have contributed to increased awareness and calls for change. LGBTQ plus rights. Black Americans have been instrumental in advancing LGBTQ plus rights. Recognizing the intersectionality of discrimination and the need for inclusivity, activists like Bayard Rustin, Marsha P. Johnson, and Audre Lorde, among others, fought for the LGBTQ plus rights alongside civil rights causes. Their work has contributed to legal victories, such as the Supreme Court's recognition of same-sex marriage and Obergefell v. Hodges, 2015. Educational access. Black Americans have fought for equal educational opportunities and access. In landmark cases like Brown v. Board of Education, they challenged racial segregation in schools, leading to desegregation efforts and increased access to quality education for Black students. Black scholars and educators have also worked to highlight the importance of culturally relevant curriculum and inclusive educational environments. Black American impact on civil rights. Abolitionism. Black Americans played a vital role in the abolitionist movement during the 19th century, fighting to end slavery. Figures like Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman worked tirelessly to expose the cruelty of slavery and promote its abolition. Civil rights movement. The civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s was a pivotal moment in American history. Black leaders, including Martin Luther King Jr., Rosa Parks, and Malcolm X, spearheaded the movement's efforts to end racial segregation and secure equal rights. Their activism, through nonviolent protests, civil disobedience, and powerful speeches, drew national attention and eventually led to legislative changes. Legal victories. Black Americans' struggle for civil rights led to significant legal victories. The landmark Supreme Court case Brown v. Board of Education in 1954 struck down racial segregation in public schools, marking a crucial step towards desegregation. Other legal victories, such as the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965, outlawed racial discrimination in various spheres, including employment, public facilities, and voting. Black Power movement. In the late 1960s and early 1970s, the Black Power movement emerged as a response to ongoing racial injustice. Black leaders and organizations, such as the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense, emphasized self-determination, self-defense, and economic empowerment. While the movement was more assertive and confrontational in its approach, it contributed to raising awareness about racial inequality and demanding change. Cultural influence. Black Americans have had a significant impact on American culture, art, music, and literature. The contributions of African Americans in fields such as jazz, blues, hip hop, literature, and visual arts have enriched the cultural fabric of the nation. These creative expressions often carry powerful messages about identity, resilience, and the fight for justice, further shaping public opinion and promoting civil rights causes. Continuing activism. Black Americans continue to play an essential role in advocating for civil rights and social justice. Movements like Black Lives Matter have gained prominence, calling attention to police brutality, systemic racism, and the disproportionate impact of these issues on Black communities. Black activists, scholars, and community leaders work tirelessly to address these challenges and promote equality and justice. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this video helped to expand your understanding of civil liberties, civil rights, their differences and complementary aspects, as well as the contributions of Black Americans to ensure that all citizens of the United States, born or naturalized, have equal opportunity and protection in pursuit of their American dream.